Okay, so uh, thank you for the introduction, and here I am going to present. The title is "Drawing Disaster: The Great Bengal Famine 1770 Revision Through Comics." But before we start my presentation, I must say, like this is a part of a Famine Tales from India and Britain project, and I was one of the artists who took part in this project in collaboration with Mr. Dev Kumar Mitro. Dev Kumar is also here, and he must be a familiar name in NID community. So actually, there were other five artists. Shekhar Da is also here. Shekhar Da also drew comics, and there are different storytelling was involved.
Orgo, can
Yeah,
I just say one or two words, just
yeah, yeah,
introduce the general
yeah.
project?
That would be very nice. Actually,
This
I was
might be,
thinking
you see,
about that.
because the principal investigator, Professor Aisha Mukherjee from Exeter University, is not present here today, as she
Yeah,
was
yeah.
supposed to.
I was
So,
surprised.
just before leaving the floor to Orgo, sorry for interrupting you, Orgo, but I just think there's a little bit, very brief introduction which is necessary before you can make complete sense of what is happening. You see, about 7 or 8 years ago, Exeter University in UK and Jadavpur University in Calcutta, they collaborated on a research project called Famines of India and Britain. That was a completely scholarly project which looked at, which tried to amass a lot of primary sources on famines in Britain and India between the mid 16th century to the mid 19th century. So you're looking at a roughly 300-year-old period between 1550 and 1850. So that was one project which was concluded and which led to a kind of a number of books and articles, and a vast repository of material on famines on various languages: English, Persian, Urdu, Hindi, on primary sources concerning famines. Now, in an in this project, the current project, these two universities are now collaborating on famine tales from India and Britain, which a book and an exhibition in the graphic format. So we have five comic book artists, of which Orgo Manna is here. There is Dev Kumar Mitro, and then there is Shekhar Mukherjee of NID, and two others, Aratrika Chaudhary and Trinankul Banerjee, and Sharbojit Sen, three others who have worked on five different famines. So the 1770s famine, which Orgo is speaking about, is one of them. Along with them, the Pottochitrakars, the painters, artisanal painters who paint pattas, or long scrolls, as they compose and sing songs about the pattas, also produced their visual responses to the various famines. So we're looking at the 1770 famine of Bengal, but also famine in Gujarat, two famines in England, and so very, very, very important milestones in the history of food security in these two nations. Now, an exhibition has recently concluded in Exeter showing the artwork of both the Pottochitrakars as well as the comics artists. And the last deliverable of this project will be a comic book, and a Potter book, which will feature the five comic stories as well as the Pottochitro references. So I thought I'd get that, set that context. Sorry, over back to you, Orgo. Orgo and Dev Kumar have worked on perhaps the most difficult of all these famines, that is the 1770 famine of Bengal, about which no documentation was at all available. So back to you, Orgo, and I promise not to interrupt anymore.
Argota, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you so much, Vijitda, for that burden. I was going to introduce the whole project because I was thinking that what is going on. Anyway, I am sharing my screen again. I think and this. Uh, so you can see it again, right?
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah, yeah. So as Professor Gupta said, there are many artists, and I was one of them. I
Guru,
just
can you make it full screen so that it becomes a little more visible, if possible?
Uh, there is a technical difficulty in my laptop. Actually, the button is not working, so please bear with that. So I'm trying, but yeah, it's not working. So anyway, I hope at least you can imagine what is going on the screen. So the title is "The Drawing Disaster." It was also the same title we used in our comics, and I and Devkumar Mitra, tried to revision the Great Bengal famine from 1770 through comics. But before we start, uh, uh, let me tell you how the Bengal famine happened. What was the background story? Actually, in the 18th century, you all know that it's from school book history. East India Company came here, and suddenly, not suddenly, gradually they became from a corporate organization to the ruler of this country. And the many war happened, and somehow the ruler from different provinces from our country, from Hyderabad, from Bengal, and other, they just became the dolls in their hands. So in this way, they become the ruler, and the main reason for behind the famine was the shifting of the power. Uh, so it was the first page from our comics actually. But when I drew this, I and Devkumar was not sure what would be our main narrative. Just we drew this as a prologue. So this is the book actually is our chief reference or the source material, The Annals of Rural Bengal, wrote by William Hunter. Hunter was a administrator. He was posted in Shiuri, Birbhum, but by heart he was a historian and a journalist too. So he was documenting Odisha famine in 1866, almost 100 years after the Bengal famine happened, and he was just used to move to and fro from Shiuri to the Odisha border in around Midnapur. And Professor Mukherjee actually wrote a beautiful blog. It was published in September when the comics was drawn. But we were in collaboration and we were in constant touch. So I got to know from her that actually uh, Hunter never saw the famine. It was not possible, of course, after he was documenting famine 100 years after. And he has a spat with Campbell, another administrative officer, how the narrative should be of a famine. So he was writing two books on Odisha famine and also the Bengal famines. So the Annals of Rural Bengal is the main source of our uh, for our comics, what the narrative could be. But again, we are not sure because I and Devuda, of course, we are from the 21st century, and from our lens, how could I imagine or how could I division the famine, what happened 250 years ago? Again, I must mention that now that this is the year of 250th year of that famine, of that disaster. So we are going to retell the story of a disaster happened 2.5 century back, and of course, we are confused. What should be our narrative? So here you can see the schematic. So we and Devuda are from 21st century. Hunter was not also from the century the famine happened. He was from 19th century. And he was actually going through the India Office document, other kind of archival material, and tried to imagine the Bengal famine in his book and documented in his book, The Annals of Rural Bengal. But actually he was experiencing the famine from the Odisha. So you can see, as a historian or a documenter or the journalist, we and Devuda were depending on Hunter's tale or what Hunter wrote. And as an artist, since there was no visuals, no European artist or any artist drew anything about Great Bengal famine. Also, the photography came in India only in, around 1840. So, of course, many European publishers like Les Petits journals from France and the Illustrated London News, they started to publish photographs and etchings and other prints of Odisha famine. So we are depending on that kind of visuals. So this was the complex thing. It was going in our mind. So again, we are not very sure. But from the very beginning, we are very sure that uh, it would be a dialogue or conversation between someone and Hunter. Like if you read the book and also Rural Bengal, Hunter is also not sure who was the responsible for that famine. He tried to document many things and many narrative, like tug of war between his own thinking. So also we are on the same positions. Like we are not very sure what is the happening 2.5 century, 250 years ago. We are also confused, just like Hunter. So, so what we did, we uh, created a fictitious character like Devdulal Mitra, and I must say the Devdulal Mitra, I envisioned the character saying Dev Kumar Mitra, my partner in this comics. So Devdual Mitra is a character. It's a completely fictional character. He was not there actually, and Devdulla Mitra is a painter and a printmaker from Calcutta from 19th century. Also, another philosophy played in our mind, like we are a fan of Joe Sacco, and you must know that the Sacco beautifully documented disasters like Palestine from Bosnia war. So uh, I and Devuda also was a journalist by profession. Few years back, Devuda was a journalist, and just a few months back, I was a journalist. So our old prejudices are we will document the famine like a journalist, but like Sacco put himself everywhere in a disastrous place or a war or somewhere. We couldn't do that because we didn't know anyone has documented the famine or not. So we created that character just like Sacco. You can see the image of Devdulal Mitra. It's quite similar to Dev Kumar also and the Sacco. So he's a fictional character, and our whole narrative of the comics is the dialogue between Hunter and the Devdula Mitra. They are asking questions to each other and sharing their own thoughts. This is the comics. So, and we consciously avoided to draw people like hungry people, they are dying on the street, like, because we also had in our mind that like in during second world war at the verge of independence of our country, Chitta Prasad also drew horrific images, and we just didn't wanted to copy that. And also Somnath Hor and Joinul Abedin also drew some images, and we were aware that we will not repeat this, and Sunil Jana's photographs also. So we are trying to something new, and we are more interested to investigate, like a historian and a journalist, what was the reason behind the famine. So you can see this panel. This is from our comics. Uh, Here, Devdullah, actually Hunter called Devdullah Mitra from Calcutta. I have already told you that at that time there was a flood of journalists in Odisha from England, from France, and they were documenting Odisha famine. So Hunter was also a prolific writer, and he got offer from many newspapers like Englishman papers and other journals. The editors commissioned him to write some articles on the famines, and Hunters wanted some illustration, just like the European was doing at that time. So he called Devdulal Mitra from Calcutta, and he was telling that no one has ever documented Bengal famine through art. And the Devdulal Mitra is telling him, okay, you are wrong. Actually, during Great Bengal famine in 18th century, there was an obscure artist who actually created a sketchbook in order to document the Bengal famine. So again, I have created a fictional sketchbook and a fictitious character, which was me actually in this panel. So in this comics, Dev Kumar has been presented as Devdulal Mitra, and I am also there as an obscure artist who actually documented famine during that time. So here's the some glimpses from the fictional sketchbook, and you can see the red circles, just like Sacco. It also played in our mind. The uh, the artist also put himself within the image. You can see at the left hand side, the vertical image, the famine. The artist is documenting famine from Murshidabad, from Dhaka, from Patna, and also Calcutta. And here is his beautiful fictional, not beautiful, of course, it's very horrific image. Uh, so, and also one thing played in our mind, like John Shore actually wrote a poem, and there is a line, if you can see this, dire scenes of horror which no pen can trace. So that line also played in our mind, like, of course, this was so horrific that no pen or any prose writer cannot trace it. So it was not enough. The archival material, all written in prose, is not enough to experience that famine. So we, again, with that thinking, we also created a fictional artist who actually drew the famine. So these are the sketchbook. But up to this, we are certain that our narrative would be the dialogue or conversations, but we are not sure about the content, because I was going to draw hungry people without knowing what real hunger is. Of course, we all are privileged people, and here I have used the term I, not we, because at that time pandemic knocked at our door, and Dev Kumar was teaching at NID and he got stuck there for months. It was a horrific time for both of us. So Dev Kumar sent his input from there, and actually, unfortunately, he couldn't participate in many drawings, and I had to do this. That was a bad time for everyone in this country and for the world. But the pandemic actually gave me the view what the narrative or the content of the narrative of a famine should be like. At that time also, the World Food Program, the chief of the World Food Program, announced that after the pandemic some certain area of the world is going to face some horrific famine again. So that played in our mind like, okay, so uh, famine comes hand in hand with such economic disasters or some events. So, and we also experienced that what happened in India, the migration of the uh, workers and other peoples. So at that time, I currently drew a comics. It was a 4-page comics for the Exeter University blog, and I drew a parallel between what happened in during Bengal famine in 18th century and what was happening then, just the last year in India. There was a lockdown, there was a demonetizations and other kind of economic disasters, and I found uncanny similarity between in between these situations. So you can see this here. Actually, I drew these panels for Scroll and Leaves podcast channel, and at that time I was reading Amartya Sen's Poverty and Famine, and that was like a aha moment for us, because how Professor Sen actually described famine, it was like just not the availability of food or the dearth of food is disavailability of food is not the only reason. There are many reasons like systematic economic disasters, siphoning of food, availability of food, the common people, the distribution of food, the road structure, how people are moving from one area to another area, and how the rulers are behaving. Again, the uncanny similarity between these two events. And so from Professor Sen's book, we understood that okay, famine is a complex event. It's just not an event like from due to some scanty rainfall and some crops failure famine happen. It's not. It's a complex thing, and you can see these are notes. I and Devuda took these notes at Bikers Cafe sipping beer. So you can see it's our notes. We together jot down this, and then we are certain that okay, so our comics will be distributed in 4 chapters. One is the sketchbook. I have already told you that we introduced two fictional characters and a fictional sketchbook. One is Devdulal Mitra, Kadev Kumar Mitra, and I, who actually fictionally documented famine and the systematic destructions, the economic destruction, and other things. The artificial crisis, the one of the reason of behind famine is the artificial crisis created by some rulers, of course, the availability of food to different section of people, and we cannot avoid this. This is nature's fury or scanty rainfall. If crops fail, the famine is unavoidable. So this is the sketch actually I made when we started this project. This is the economic network, or how the coins and other how the different laborers and different section of people like Diwan, like the he was at the top of the pyramid of the economic structure, and other shofs are the bankers actually. So you can find the similarity like the if you want to find the similarity like how bank behaved at that time of the pandemic, and other sections the laborers are at the bottom of that economic pyramid. So here is the cycle. It was a complete network or a stable sustainable structure which was there in Bengal. British, or I would say the East Indian Company, the rulers actually destroyed it. In At that moment famine didn't happen, but it was the beginning. Another siphoning of food. When the crop failed, what the East India Company did, they actually siphoned food grains to different region where their garrisons were. So common people didn't get the food. Again, I think you will find the similarity with the current situation. And of course, the scanty rainfall. You can see the horrific yellow, the landscape. And you can notice that in if almost in every panel, Devdulal Mitro is discussing with Hunter what is happening. So these are the basic. Of course, I cannot show you every panels, but this is the basic narrative. Like we are dealing with three timeline. Like we were in 21st, we are in 21st century with the creators, and we are depending on Hunter's narrative, who actually wrote the famine, seeing a famine happen in 19th century, and he wrote about 18th century. So there are three timelines. So to deal with that, we had to create some fictitious character and create some metafiction kind of thing. Like a artist is in conversation with a historian, and this is the basic narrative structure of our comics, and in this way the whole comics is built up. And here you can see that I redrawn the cover image of the Lepiti journals and Illustrated London News and the graphic. And I was very surprised to find that Punch magazine also published some cartoons on Odisha famines. So ultimately, our story ends like this: like Devdulal Mitra created some live drawing, the illustrated story for newspaper where Hunter was to be published, but somehow his sketchbook was lost and he was never published. So basically, you can consider his sketchbook is our comics, and the sketchbook he showed to the Hunter, the obscure artist, that was also lost. So at the right side of the screen, you can see that this is a 10 feet long sketchbook. I created this because, of course, we are creating some fictitious sketchbook, so we have to create a new one. So that's how our comics ended. So this is my last slide actually. So now I'm going back to the meeting. So if you have any questions or that, so.
Orgo, if I may suggest something, since your screen, since this was not possible to show full screen, from the
Yeah,
website,
yeah.
it might be possible to show very quickly the full screen version, because if you,
I think okay.
I can try from my machine if there's a problem with your button. If
Am
you,
I? Let me do one thing. Can I? This is no. So again, the button is not working actually.
I
Yeah.
mean, if you permit me, I have
Yeah.
got the website
Yeah.
page.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Of course. Of course.
Because I think
That
it
would
is
be very nice
nice
actually.
to show this in greater detail, because so for example, if you see
Yeah.
this, I think this might actually give a I'll- is this any better? I mean, this is slightly uh, larger. I'll just quickly scroll through them. If you want to stop at any point, either Dev Kumar or go.
Yeah, this looks better, much better, more readable.
So these are our notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see through. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just scroll them through.
Yeah, this is the map actually. We're trying to understand where the famine happened actually. This is the old map of the Bengal province. So I and Devkumar are actually using some transparent sheets to trace where does the site was and the area affected by the famines. These are the notes I showed you, the very complex web-like notes. So here's the sketch of the first panel actually. after the Boxer War, I was trying to build up the environment or the backdrop or landscape, whatever you say. So yeah, I we were certain that we wanted to be some real, just like journalists, like so not many representational image, like many real images. We tried to incorporate. Yeah, the landscape from Calcutta at the time, like different buildings and many things we didn't incorporate in the main comics, but we sketched. Like, there's the village coming from Birbhum. The, when Hunter was posted at Birbhum. This is the Murshidabad, and this is the building from the last Nawab of Dhaka. He also was one of the responsible person for famine because he siphoned food grains within his house and distributed as per his own terms. Like the common people didn't get. There is a sketch of Hunter, like the young Hunter and the old Hunter. Different players at that during the time of Battle of Palashi and Baksar. So you have the British, not British, East India Company hired some Indian soldiers. So how was their, how they looked like at that time, the dress ups. And here I was building the sketchbook, the fixed sketchbook. So unfinished sketchbook. The obscure artist did that actually. Yeah.
Interestingly, I mean, we have enough material to write a complete, much larger narrative.
Yeah, Obviously, can you please stop here?
Yeah.
I want to. Yeah, from this image, you can see just at the bottom right corner a people with pox. So, but I want to mention that when famine happened or some dearth of food happened, the pox is a disease first come hand in hand. So there was a we had a plan, like we discussed a lot with I and the Fonta, like what kind of disease people face. Like it's the dearth of food directly affect the biology of the human body. So, but we didn't have that room. We had the page limitations. But here, just a single glimpse, you can see the pox. Pox comes, and many people died out of pox, not just because of lack of food. Also, at that time, the Prince of Murshidabad also died there. At that time during famine pox. So here I was making that book in my room. So I do not have a studio setup, so I just wanting to adjust the lights and other kind of things during photography.
So now I would like to request all of our guests to put any questions they have in the chat box. Till the time the audience asks their question, I personally have one. So, um, as a serious topic as famine is, um, uh, you guys decided not to put any, dying and those illustrations in the comic. Why was that such a like such an important decision, or why did you make that decision? Can you
Devkumar, you want to answer that?
Okay. I mean, the way we wanted to see, whenever a famine is represented visually, whether in terms of photographs, you see skeletons lying on fields which there are no crops, or you would see that um, there are vultures and other kind of carrion eaters around dead bodies and so on and so forth. So the choice we made was not that we do not want to represent that fact. That's those things are very much there in the sketchbook, but which was a part of an exhibition which unfortunately could not take place because of pandemic. Otherwise, the narrative itself it's a little complex and layered. So we wanted to focus more on the issues that was surrounding the real issues behind the famine, rather focus on the visual um, imagery, which is rather common. And if you read our narrative, then you will come to know that we, it's not that we haven't shown any dead body anywhere, but it's just that it's not in the passing and not the major event. um, there are some brilliant films that have been made in India. Um for example, one is reminded of Akale Shandane. You don't see too many dead bodies in there, but you can still feel the paucity of food and um, hunger and such issues that are associated with it. That's a nice question, Pragya, by the way.
Yeah, I just want to add one or two line with that, in line with Devuda, of course. Like the thing was in our mind that, like, in famine, when the event happens, like, people die, of course, but whenever we see some dire scene of horror, like war photography, people are dying, we see that and we forget that, and we again go into our normal life. But the reason behind famine, it's not a, just as I told you during the presentation, it's not a single event, it's a process. So we are more focused on the process, so that we can understand the process and we can take some learning from it. Like, we need to stop that. When it happens, it happens. We cannot stop the death of the people, but we can stop the event if you want. So it was just our little try through art. Yeah.
Yeah, now it's better clear, because usually, like recently, the famine in Africa was documented, and you see photographers just showing pictures of malnourished kids and dead bodies lying. So I was very much interested why this unique take on a similar famine that happened in India. Yeah, but the context matters a lot, and it should be highlighted the whole process. So I get it.
If I may jump in and ask a question.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Arghota Devkumar. That I've had a good fortune of having a front row seat to this artwork being created, and it was a wonderful journey. But my question to you is, Arghota, particularly to you, I think, because of the accordion book, there are some very immediate resonances between certain tiles in the corresponding scroll painting that deals with the same story and images in the accordion book. I'm just and it was very interesting for me to see. Do you think, was there a conscious give and take that in your head when you were making that artwork? Is there a dialogue that's happening between the two very different forms of artwork that's created from the same source?
I do not know actually. I never saw their image when they were creating. I
Okay.
just, and I was not aware at all what they were creating. But I think, since I actually during while I was creating the accordion book, I did a lot of visual research from British Library and other kind of archives. So since the India office holds some records from like village paintings from that time, or some native painters there, and also at that time Darlingpur published a book or the obscure artist at that time working in India and other part of Calcutta and other part of India like Bihar. And so I think I took the visual references from them, which was perhaps they are close to the visual narrative with the traditional Portuguese. So somehow they uh, got similarities.
It's a wonderful treat to see both artworks side by side. It's up on our website if anybody's interested in taking a look. And another question I have is about the choice of color, because there's a predominance of yellow and a
Mm,
particularly gorgeous and threatening red that Deepkumar has used for one of the chapter
yeah.
beginnings. Could you talk a little bit about your choice of
Okay,
color,
I will
Deepkumar?
tell you about the yellow. Devuda will tell you about the red, and this is our conscious choice. I am telling you, I used yellow for two reasons. One is yellow is the color of pale things. So Picasso used blue for to describe death. I knew that, and again, I didn't want to repeat him. So at first, at Bikers Cafe in our first meeting, we thought that our whole comics will be in blue because Picasso did that. This is the color of death. Then we decided, okay, Picasso did that. We do not need to repeat him. So what would be our principal color? So it would be yellow. Yellow is the color of dust when corpse falls, of course. So the sense we are trying to giving is everything is in dust, and it's yellow. It's paling, and uh, of course, people will say since we are drawing history, some kind of sepia tones merged with that concept. That was not in our head, but of course, that concept also comes. But we are conscious that we will represent the yellow as our color of death, and the red. Devuda will tell you the reason
Okay,
behind.
the there is the choice of red is um, see, I grew up in a part of the world where I was constantly reminded that if you see if the sky turns red, then the storm is going to brew, and there's something ominous. And that choice, I mean, I saw some reds which I had, um, and then I decided no, it could be bordering on scarlet, so that it gives you a kind of a very uh, um, um, it should evoke some kind of a fear in the reader's mind that something ominous is going to take place. So that is what why it is mostly read. Uh, Also that um, I mean the because of the it also creates a kind of a contrast with what's inside. Suddenly you open it, and then your attention will be taken by that yellow that Orgo uses so well. And I believe that because of that, this essential transition from one color to the other, the emotion also has to, I mean, that is our expectation. I do not know. When I read it, I s- I read it that way. Maybe someone else will read it and will find something else.
Thank you, Devkumar. That is exactly the feeling that it evokes for me. It's sinister, it's ominous, and the barrenness of the land that is highlighted with that use of that yellow. It's absolutely wonderful. The contrast too. Thank you.
So, are there any questions, by the way, Pragya? No.
No, there are none yet in our chat box. I think our
Uh,
audience is taking time
okay,
to.
Orgo has briefly mentioned that during the collaboration, I was stuck there at Namburu village, not exactly Namburu village, but at the IJM. Um, anyway, so it is uh, it is it was difficult because Orgo was getting frantic. We wanted to do something. We wanted to finish the work together, and not happening. And what we found is we decided to have a. Initially, we thought that we will do chapter wise. He will do one chapter. I'll do one chapter, but that did not happen.
Right.
The artwork Orgo did, but uh, it's a narrative which was developed jointly with and I believe that the narrative itself, Orgo has given some visual twists to it, which adds a kind of very refreshing feeling when one reads it. With, and when I compare with the notes that I have personally, yeah, actually, the sections of the chapter remain the same, but that's what decided. That's the main structure. Beyond that, um, I guess the isolation had got this positive thing. Orgo could finish it much faster than than we thought, because we were getting really frantic that we will not be able to finish it because so much of material. Um, and I can reveal that he and I are making some plans so that we can build on this, uh, and something can be come out of that. I don't know when, but let's hope
Right.
it comes
Yeah,
through.
we are in continuous discussions. Like we have many materials, and so that we can come with a more larger, perhaps a book, entire book on famine history in subcontinent. Let's see.
I had one more question before we leave, if it's okay. So, during your presentation, you drew a very interesting parallel between modern day famine caused by corona and,
Right,
you know, that
right,
that happened in Bengal.
right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, like the environment and the political situation of India
Right.
was it's very different in both of the cases, but there is a lot of parallel and a lot of similarities. So if you could elaborate on it a little more,
Mhm.
that'll be interesting.
Okay. Yeah, this is my favorite question actually. uh, actually when the pandemic knocked at our door and we were locked down, I wrote an editorial at a newspaper, a Bengali newspaper. So I am just briefing what I wrote. That will, I think, clear what you asked. Well, when I drew the comics, the parallel for the Exeter University blog, it was not part of our main comics. Actually, I was returning from office, and at that time, our prime minister just announced the lockdown suddenly. Okay, so I was returning home. It was around 12 a.m. at night, midnight, and there was a lots of people. They were trying to get back to home, and they couldn't around Howrah stations. So then I thought to stop the car, and I interviewed some people at the midnight. Then the next day I again get back to office. This was the last day in that were in my office, because office was shutting down for work from home. So I decided to take a notebook, and I asked many laborers, more than 12 laborers around the Chandni Chowk area, the where my office belonged, and I asked their fears, what they were thinking. Their narrative came out just like I envisioned it, like if some interviewed some laborers 250 years ago, that would be quite similar. One thing. Another thing is, when I was reading Hunter's narratives, I found just before the Great Bengal famine, there was also a demonetization. This was uncanny similarity. Then I tried to collect every material with that thinking that what were the similarities. And when I gathered many information, I drew that comic. So it's not that I would not say that. Of course, the political situations is different. That we have, you have a distance of 250 years, but the signs and the symbols are similar. It's uncanny, but it's similar. So that this is my answer. Of course, we are in a new era. There are new world. Perhaps we can like this in India, but in pockets, famines, dearth of food is happening in India. And if you check the food security list, published by the World Food Program, we are far behind from many countries. So for us, we are not facing famines, but
I think he froze. There's some internet issue.
I guess so.
yeah, internet was. Anyway, so I think my answer is clear.
That's all from my side. If anybody has any other question, they can ask now, or we can call it a day.
So we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is
Thank you, everyone, for a great
lovely.
and a very informative and exciting session. It was wonderful to, see so many different takes on an event that is sort of repeating itself right now. So, yeah, thank you for a great session, and thank you for taking your time out to, board our mood train. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having us here. These are lovely sessions. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye. মিটিংটা লেট কিবার পরে কি করে